Scarlet Witch, played by Elizabeth Olsen in the MCU's ongoing film series, is my favourite character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There are multiple reasons for this, but after extensive and repetitive conversations with my partner and friends, I've decided to sum it up in this video. Who is Wanda Maximoff? Wanda Maximoff, aka the Scarlet Witch, first appeared in the Marvel Comics back in 1964 alongside her brother Pietro as the illegitimate mutant children of Magneto. Like in Age of Ultron, she starts out as a villain before being recruited into the Avengers as a hero. However, despite being on the side of good, her mental health struggles and strong chaotic powers tended to result in something bad happening. One psychotic breakdown later, one of the most famous Marvel events in history occurred, House of M. With her chaos magic, Wanda altered the entire world's reality, and almost no one realized. If that's not powerful, I don't know what is. The MCU introduced Wanda and Pietro in 2015 in Age of Ultron. However, Fox had already introduced their own Quicksilver in 2014 in the acclaimed X-Men film Days of Future Past. At the time, these characters were in completely separate universes, so it was a bit of a competition to see who would do better. Honestly though, Fox's Quicksilver turned out way more charming and fun to watch than the MCU's. However, I was intrigued to see how the one and only on-screen Scarlet Witch would fare after reading up on her. Although dropped in later appearances, the MCU gave Wanda a creepy, almost horror film vibe when introducing her. Her ability to mess with people's minds, essentially putting them out of action, but also manipulate physical objects was already very powerful. For her first appearance, and knowing the famous events her character could cause, this was pretty exciting to see on screen. It also fits very nicely into her comic book counterpart's struggle with psychosis and mental health. Tragedy and mental health. Despite Wanda's good intentions, she is an Avenger that is constantly surrounded by personal tragedy, to a shocking degree. Starting the series as an orphaned political protester, in her first appearance she loses the one person she always had by her side, her brother. In her next appearance, Captain America Civil War, while attempting to save Captain America from a fatal blow, she accidentally blows up the side of a building. She is then shunned by the world, hated for her mistake, and this sets into motion the Accords that tear the Avengers apart. In Avengers Infinity War, she not only loses Vision, but she is the only one that can kill him, and if she doesn't, the Avengers will lose. Then, when she does succeed, she has to watch as Thanos undoes her actions and kills him all over again. Wanda has been pushed into a pit of self-loathing and despair by these tragic events, and when she is dusted, she is by the side of her dead lover and doesn't even try to speak or fight as she evaporates. She just knows they lost regardless. When Wanda loves someone, she will do anything to protect them. It destroyed her when her brother was killed. She was fighting a horde of sentries and sensed his death instantly. Her grief and anguish in that moment sent out a huge blast of energy that obliterated all surrounding sentries. Pietro and Wanda were shown as very close throughout Age of Ultron, and were the only remaining members of their family, so this wasn't an unexpected reaction. When Pietro was killed protecting Sokovia, that meant that Wanda was now truly alone in the world, and her main support was gone. When the city fell, she accepted her fate, ready to die with her home until Vision saved her. Once the people of Sokovia were safe, she felt she had nothing more to do, showing the extent of her grief and subsequent depression. Following the events of Age of Ultron, her home and brother being gone left her in a very new and unfamiliar place. While she was taken in by the Avengers, her entire world was changed, and it's not unlikely that she felt very isolated without her brother. These feelings of isolation and depression are relatable to audiences, making her more real and understandable, but also a more tragic and complex character trying to find her place in the world that doesn't understand her. She doesn't mention Pietro after Age of Ultron, which I take as a sign of her trying to move on from the tragic events of the past, but also keeping this side of her life private and intimate. Of course, the Avengers films move quite fast with time jumps in between films, so it's difficult to say how she processed her grief after Vision saved her from Sokovia's destruction. For the most part, Vision and Wanda's relationship has been off-screen, although there are hints of it in Civil War that can be easily missed, such as her nickname for him,
Viz, we talked about this.
Yes, but the door was open, so I assumed that...
Him becoming more distracted when checking up on her during the battle in Civil War.
Copy. Target is thruster. Turn him into a glider.
I became distracted. I didn't think that was possible. Neither did I.
And his attempts to cheer her up.
Spirits lifted.
In my defense, I haven't actually ever eaten anything before.
There's also an awkwardness towards her that is understandable, as a robot begins to have romantic feelings towards a human, which can't really be easily explained by a Google search. At the beginning of Infinity War, Wanda and Vision are in a relationship. They are much more relaxed, and this is probably the first time we've seen Wanda obviously happy since her brother's death. When faced with the possibility of Vision's death being the only chance to save the universe, she is against it immediately. She does not want to go through that loss again. This is a central tension for Wanda during Infinity War, balancing the life of the man she loves versus half of the universe. This responsibility is put entirely on her shoulders. Her instinct is to reject this option for her own happiness. She finally has a close support on a level akin to her late brother. Killing Vision would save the world, but also likely put her back in the deep depression and grief she felt when her brother died, and restored the feelings of isolation and loneliness that came with it. Her reaction is very real and very human, but ultimately, she destroys Vision and the Mind Stone because there is no option left.
It's not fair. It shouldn't be you, but it is. It's all right. You could never hurt me. I just feel you.
Wanda is not afraid to show her pain. This makes her easier to understand and sympathize with. She opens up to Captain America after the Lagos incident, and ripping out Ultron's metaphorical heart was her way of demonstrating her own heartbreak to this psychotic robot, and achieving her own small revenge.
It felt like that.
It demonstrated how she felt in that moment, filled with rage and despair. The red colour of her psionic abilities when used are very apt here, as red is commonly seen as a very passionate colour that ties in with the emotional reactions and use of her power. During Captain America Civil War, Wanda is seen in a state of depression. Who wouldn't be, sentenced to exile, under house arrest for an accident that killed innocent civilians, and now hated and feared by billions? Having that on your shoulders with a slightly naive robot for company, who is also weirdly your captor, at the very least, Wanda is racked with guilt.
It's my fault.
That's not true.
You can turn the TV back on. They're being very specific.
This is fitting, as Wanda Maximoff acts as a figure that fights against the stigma of mental health in the Marvel comics. In this scene with Captain America, her depression has her defeated and filled with self-loathing. She punishes herself by watching the news criticize her over and over, agreeing with the arguments, and even fighting their side against Captain America. She's alone and quiet in her room, further isolating herself from the world. This is really impactful, as depression and self-hatred does not have to be loud and dramatic, or even obvious, and is a great representation of what it can be like to be depressed. The character of Wanda Maximoff is still relatively young in the grand scheme of things. As Wanda's age has never been confirmed canonically, if we use Olsen's age, Wanda is 26 during the Age of Ultron and 29 during Infinity War. Therefore, like me, she's in her 20s for much of her on-screen appearances that we've seen so far, which also makes her quite a bit younger than the other Avengers when she was introduced. It can be argued that she may be slightly emotionally stunted due to the death of her parents and manipulation by others, as well as the experimentation undergone by Hydra. This would also explain the slightly lax and immature attitude of her twin brother, Pietro.
No, go on. You're saying?
Wanda has had a lot of hurdles come her way, and dealt with a lot of feelings towards herself, unjustified or not, that a lot of people can relate to, such as self-doubt, unfairly guilting herself, and maybe even self-hatred. The audience is following her on a journey of figuring herself out, especially following the death of her twin, her new abilities, and just trying to figure out her place in the world. Coupled with possible mental health issues from the events of the films, it's likely she's struggling to find herself at all and recognize what she wants.
I used to think of myself one way, but after this, I am something else. I'm still me, I think, but that's not what everyone else sees.
This can be seen in how she presents herself throughout the films, in a typical teenage style with lots of rings, dark colours, and dark makeup, reminiscent of a slightly gothic look. This is a look she seems to grow out of, as we see in her later appearances, and as she Americanizes herself a bit more. Changing motivations. Wanda and Pietro's shared hatred of Tony Stark and the Avengers came from a place of revenge, but also wanting the war to end in Sokovia after it effectively destroyed their family. This was their main motivation for undergoing the potentially fatal experiments that killed its other volunteers. They wanted to help people and make a positive change, away from war. However, they were manipulated, first by List, and then by Ultron. Lacking a parental figure since they were 10 years old, it's no wonder they are manipulated like this by authority figures.
How could you?
The pivotal choice that Wanda is given, her new motivation, is presented to her by Hawkeye in the film's climax. She chooses to keep fighting, despite her fear, to save Sokovia and its people from Ultron. Having only had each other for company for most of their lives, the Maximoff twins' bond was strong. A Stark Industries mortar shell killed their parents, and they were trapped for 2 days with each other in its ruins. It's clear in Age of Ultron how close they are, working together constantly, Pietro leaving the thick of battle to save his tased sister from Hawkeye without hesitation, and Wanda's reaction to her brother's death, despite not even being at the scene. They have a supernatural bond, be it from the power of the Mind Stone that gave them their powers, or just a weird twin thing. On a personal level, as someone with siblings that I'm close to, that type of bond is something I can understand, and seeing that familial love on screen immediately resonated with me.
You understand?
You know, I'm 12 minutes older than you.
Go.
Wanda's motivations are fueled by empathy. She officially becomes an Avenger in her drive to protect the people of Seoul and Sokovia in Avengers Age of Ultron. She wants to help people and protect the people she loves. That's her ultimate goal.
Come back for me when everyone else is off, not before.
As proven by her switch to the side of the Avengers to protect the people of Sokovia from Ultron, Wanda is open-minded and intelligent. Even early on in Avengers Age of Ultron, after creating a vision in Tony's mind of his greatest fear, Wanda realizes Tony fears leading humanity to total destruction through his misgivings. She understands him a little more from this and believes he will be the Avengers' downfall. She's almost proved right later when he uses Ultron's superior body to create Vision, which could have easily gone just as wrong for the Avengers. However, she is humbled too, as her alliance with Ultron cost her her brother and almost resulted in the world's destruction. As she struggles to figure herself out, Wanda tries not to let her own wants and desires get in the way of doing the right thing, even when she might deserve to be a little more selfish. When she moves to Scotland after the events of Civil War, it is Vision that suggests they stay together and he doesn't return to the USA. Despite everything she's been through, she still feels obligated to be available to help Captain America, sacrificing their happiness for the sake of others.
Well, there are people who are expecting me too, you know. We both made promises.
Not to each other. Wanda, for 2 years, we've stolen these moments, trying to see if this could work. And I don't know. You know what? I'm just going to speak for myself. I think
It works.
It works.
It works.
Stay with me.
She loves Vision and has finally found safety and happiness with him, but her empathy and loyalty for others puts her in conflict.
I'm overstepping.
Cornered in a train station in Scotland at the start of Avengers Infinity War, she's ready to sacrifice herself to protect Vision, demonstrating the immense value and love she has for Vision and others above herself.
Please stay.
You asked me to stay. I'm safe.
During the battle in Wakanda, when Wanda sees that her friends are in danger, and despite promising to stay and protect Vision, she knows where she is needed to save more lives. It is possible Black Widow or Okoye may have died there without her aid.
Why was she up there all this time?
Until Tony's death in Avengers Endgame, it could be argued that Wanda, alongside Peter Quill aka Star-Lord, made the biggest sacrifice to try and win the battle in Avengers Infinity War. After losing her brother just a few years prior, Wanda then was forced to murder the only other person she truly loved, Vision. As stated in Avengers Endgame, Thanos,
You took everything from me.
I don't even know who you are.
You will.
can imagine her emotional state as being hugely lost and alone. Similar to her defeat of Ultron, her motives are now fueled by vengeance and pain. Her only other friends are the Avengers, and even then, we don't see a huge bond with them beyond motivational pep talks about fighting and discussions about each film's events. There is an inkling of a bond with Hawkeye hinted at the end of Endgame that may be explored in future films. Overall, her emotional state and what she has left leaves an excellent setup for WandaVision and Vision's currently inexplicable return. The most powerful Avenger. There has been extensive debate about who is the most powerful Avenger. Well, it's clearly Wanda. Maybe only in doubt when compared with Captain Marvel due to her link with the Power Stone, but it's Wanda. I've covered Wanda's depression and guilt, and the tragedies she's faced so far that have impacted her story. She can tap into more of the Mind Stone's energy when her emotions are stronger, and she's already proven herself to be a very emotional person. Should she learn to control this properly, it's difficult to pinpoint the limits of her powers. Her power came from an Infinity Stone, already an immensely powerful gem tied to the center of the universe. Yet, unlike Quicksilver and Vision, Wanda seems to be able to tap into its power far more and do a lot more with it. Just a few examples of what we've seen Wanda do so far. She can fly, manipulate incredibly dense solids and gases, twist people's perception, mind control, create beams that destroy and delay incredibly powerful objects and people, and influence the Mind Stone inside Vision.
I'm sorry.
Thanos, with the power of 5 Infinity Stones, was delayed by the sheer power of Wanda's energy force in the finale of Infinity War. Keeping in mind she was also forcing a lot of her power on Vision at the same time to destroy an Infinity Stone. This was a move that surprised Thanos and, coupled with her sacrifice, earned his respect. The responsibility, urgency, and high emotional turmoil Wanda felt all made her power stronger, likely without her even realizing the extent of it, as she was dusted moments later. In 2023, at the conclusion of Avengers Endgame, Thanos is even forced to call an impromptu airstrike on the battlefield as he fights Wanda, due to her power tearing him apart. Kevin Feige, president of Marvel Studios, has said, "I contend she would have taken down Thanos if he hadn't called them. It was done." Wanda's powers are clearly heavily influenced by her emotions. When she screams from grief at her brother's death, she destroys a horde of sentries around her without realizing it. That could also indicate a lack of control and personal understanding of her power. If Wanda doesn't understand how strong she can be, it's likely she doesn't know the full extent of her powers and how much power the Infinity Stone has given her. It's exciting because the MCU is still very much developing her powers and character, so it hints at a lot of great developments to come for her, which we could see soon in WandaVision. Female representation in the MCU. For many years, the MCU has been very male-dominated. In a cast of 6, the original Avengers team had one woman, who was introduced in the Iron Man sequel in 2010. Black Widow was featured in the MCU for 9 years before finally getting her own solo film. This was despite demands from fans for her to have a solo film sooner. In fact, plans for her solo film actually began back in 2004, but they were cancelled. Instead, Black Widow was relegated to supporting her male counterparts and co-starring in their solo films outside of Avengers. That being said, my intention is not to downplay her character here at all. Black Widow is a badass, loyal, and strong woman, and her friendship with Captain America is one of my favourite relationships in the MCU. In recent years, the MCU has been attempting to branch out from only having hot white men at the forefront of their heroes, as seen in the infamous Avengers Endgame scene, where they had all the female members of the MCU come together to protect the Infinity Gauntlet alongside the most recently introduced Captain Marvel. While I admit this might have been a pretty inspiring, but mostly cringy moment, it also highlighted how recent a lot of these characters are, considering the 13-year span of the franchise so far. One of the first big female characters to emerge after Black Widow that wasn't a designated love interest or minor side character was Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch. I wanted the character of Wanda to be a good one from the beginning, because I knew that if her character was celebrated, that would mean the introduction of more varied female characters too. It can be easy to stick to what works, and if having the same sort of white man at the forefront of your film works, then there is little desire to change. Back in 2015, there was little diversity in the MCU's superhero selection. Diversity in cinema is important to me, so this puts pressure on those characters to perform well when introduced. This was successful, and in the last 5 years and in the next 5 years, we are expected to see a fantastic lineup of new heroes to root for that can represent so many more people. However, beyond just being another female Avenger other than Black Widow, Wanda's character has so much more to offer. She's powerful, she's complicated, she introduces conversations about mental health, and she keeps fighting like a true Avenger despite the tragedies she's faced. She's unlike the other Avengers in that she doesn't have the same wit or humor as them, characteristics which have long appealed to the Marvel fanbase for their favorite characters. She's been growing up a lot during the Avengers series by learning how to be an Avenger, and also learning a lot about herself and her powers. For most of her appearances, Wanda has been a side character to the main Avengers stories. WandaVision will be the first time we see her taking a leading role in her own story. In conclusion, it was a big deal introducing Wanda Maximoff to the MCU because of her link to House of M. Being a character faced with a lot of tragedy, it is incredibly likely the MCU plan to take full advantage of this link, and are setting her up to change a lot within the MCU in the coming years. She's already proven herself to be a very powerful yet complex superhero, with the likelihood of having much more to come in terms of power. Her empathy and mental health struggles keep her relatable and sympathetic to the audience, and can be seen as one of her weaknesses. However, she doesn't let that keep her down. She keeps fighting, no matter what, because she is a true hero at heart. In WandaVision, we finally have the chance to fully explore the character of Wanda. I expect to see a lot of tragedy, humor, mental health references, character growth, and more in WandaVision for both Wanda and Vision. And I can't wait.